My name is Daniel Cross. I'm a 42-year-old Army Staff Sergeant, logistics specialist, and veteran of more deployments than I care to count. When it happened, I was stationed in southern Afghanistan, a dusty FOB carved into the hills, surrounded by dry wind and quiet tension. My job was inventory control and airstrip coordination. Not glamorous, but vital. I liked the routine. I liked the order. Amanda, my wife of 7 years, was back in Colorado Springs. We met through mutual friends when I was stationed at Fort Carson. She worked in insurance. Quiet, funny, always had her nose in a book. We weren't the perfect couple, nobody is, but we had a rhythm. We didn't fight, we didn't keep secrets. At least, that's what I believed. The notification came through a secure military channel, which already made my heart freeze. It wasn't a Red Cross message. It wasn't flagged as family emergency. It was a flat, short dispatch. Civilian spouse Amanda Cross deceased. Circumstances, vehicle accident. Contact local legal liaison upon return. I stared at the screen, read it again, and again. Then silence. No voice. No follow-up. Just the hum of the air unit and the distant cough of a diesel generator. Amanda was dead. They wouldn't let me fly out immediately, not unless I was next of kin for funeral arrangements. Her parents were listed instead. By the time I got leave clearance and a flight out, it had already been a week. She'd been cremated. No viewing. No chance to say goodbye. When I finally landed back in Colorado, the air felt different, heavier. My house felt colder. Her presence was missing in ways I couldn't even name. Her scent was gone. Her laugh didn't echo off the walls, just a void. I tried to accept it. I went through her things, kept the letters she'd written me during past deployments, boxed up her scarves and photos. I sat on the couch for hours, staring at nothing, not eating, not speaking. But something didn't sit right. It started with the insurance paperwork. Amanda had a small life insurance policy through her job, nothing massive. But when I called the company, they said the policy had been changed 2 months prior. The beneficiary was no longer me. It was listed under someone named Derek Cole. I thought it was a clerical error. I asked them to double-check. It wasn't. I'd never heard that name before. Then I found an old envelope tucked into the back of our closet. Amanda's handwriting. On the front, one word. If. Inside, a letter. Handwritten, rambling, nervous tone. If anything happens to me, please don't trust Derek. He's not what he seems. I was stupid to let him back in. She didn't finish the letter. The last line trailed off mid-sentence. I read it twice, then again. I Googled his name, and that's when it started to click. Derek Cole, her ex-husband, the one she said she hadn't spoken to in years. But somehow, now, he was the listed beneficiary on her policy. And Amanda was died in a single-vehicle crash, no witnesses, cremated before I could ask questions. Something was wrong. I felt it in my gut, in the same place you feel an ambush coming. And what Derek didn't know was that I wasn't just a grieving husband. I was a soldier, and I was about to turn this morning into a mission. Returning from a war zone to a funeral without a body is like stepping into a dream where nothing fits. I moved through the motions, meeting with Amanda's parents, accepting quiet condolences from coworkers and neighbors, while inside I was tracing timelines, checking inconsistencies. I didn't tell anyone about the letter, not yet. I needed more. I visited the crash site first. 2 hours outside the city, a back road off a state highway. No cameras, no intersection, just a broken guardrail and a scorched mark on the ground where her car had supposedly flipped and burned. The sheriff's report listed driver lost control, and the photos showed a wrecked sedan and a body burned beyond recognition. Only, it wasn't Amanda's car, not the one I knew. It had her plates, yes, but it had been purchased just weeks prior, and she never mentioned buying a new vehicle. I started digging. I requested the coroner's report. It came back vague. Cause of death? Trauma and fire damage. No dental match was made. The body was too far gone. Identification was based on the driver's license found in the purse. The purse was intact, but the body wasn't. I knew something was off. I looked up Derek again. He had a criminal record, minor charges, fraud, check-kiting, nothing that screamed murderer, but enough to raise eyebrows. I checked Amanda's call history. She'd spoken to him several times in the months before her death. Then I pulled her financials. Amanda had withdrawn $15,000 in cash a week before the crash, another $5,000 the day before. Where did that money go? There was no trace. Unless you count the hotel receipt I found buried in her email. A 3-night stay under a different name, 3 towns over, just 2 days before her supposed death. I drove there. The manager didn't recognize Amanda's photo, but when I showed Derek's mugshot, he didn't hesitate. Yeah, that guy? He was here, with some woman, left in a hurry. I thanked him and drove back in silence. I wasn't grieving anymore. I was hunting. Amanda may have been scared. She may have been running. But Derek, he was the constant in all this. The insurance, the secrecy, the crash. And he didn't know I was tracking him now. I went to Paul next, my old army buddy turned private investigator. I told him everything. He didn't ask stupid questions, just listened and nodded. You think he killed her? I don't know, I said, but I think he gained something from her disappearance. Paul leaned back in his chair. Then let's find out what. So we started. Bank records, travel logs, real estate documents, security footage. We mapped everything, and with every lead, the pieces began to shift. Amanda's death wasn't a tragedy. It was a setup, and I was going to dismantle it, piece by piece. The first real crack in Derek's story came from Amanda's old laptop. It was buried deep in a box I hadn't opened. When I booted it up, the screen flickered like it hadn't been touched in months. The password was still the one we used years ago, the name of our favorite diner. Once inside, I went straight to her emails. Most were mundane, work, online shopping, promotions. But hidden in a folder labeled archive_2 were half a dozen exchanges between her and a lawyer named Marissa Gellert. The subject line caught my eye. Updated trust, need witness. Amanda had been working to update her will. She had inherited something significant, property apparently, from an uncle who had died out west, ranch land in New Mexico. She hadn't told me about it, but the document said she'd wanted to keep it protected, quote, kept separate from Daniel and Derek in case either relationship turned south. That line hit me like a slap. She hadn't trusted either of us. But it was what followed that got my attention. She'd written that Derek had become manipulative again, and she was afraid he might try something to gain control. She requested the lawyer finalize the trust quietly and was planning to sign the papers the week she died. I contacted Marissa under a fake name, said I was a distant relative needing verification. She replied quickly, confirming Amanda had indeed made an appointment, but never showed. Strike one. Next, Paul pulled Derek's financials. It took a few strings and a favor from an old cyber analyst friend of his, but we got a look. A deposit for $10,000 had been made into Derek's account 3 days after Amanda's crash, labeled consulting, from an LLC registered to a burner address. The timing was too perfect. And then there was the burner phone. Paul found the number on Amanda's call log. Dozens of short calls, no voicemail, no trace. But the SIM card had pinged a tower near the crash site, hours before the accident. Paul tracked the number's last known GPS location. It matched the hotel. Suddenly, we had geography, motive, and timeline. Amanda had tried to escape something. She may have tried to fake her own death, or was forced into a crash staged to look like one. And Derek? He was moving money, keeping quiet, living well. But he didn't expect someone to pull apart the web he'd built. I started writing everything down. Every timestamp, every transfer, every contradiction. This wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was a case, and I was the one building it, one layer at a time.
You learn quickly in combat zones that revenge is messy. Justice, on the other hand, is clean because it follows structure. That's the path I chose. I started by reaching out to Amanda's former financial advisor, a man named Doug Granger. We'd met once at a dinner Amanda hosted for a few friends and colleagues. I remembered him as the kind of man who always wore navy blazers and called everyone by their full name. He was reluctant at first, said most of Amanda's files were under confidentiality clauses. But once I presented my military power of attorney and cited the inconsistencies I'd uncovered, his tone shifted. She seemed nervous, Doug said over the phone, and confused. She asked a lot of questions about trusts, about how fast transfers could happen. Was she alone when she came in? A pause. No, Derek was with her. Of course he was. Doug agreed to send me copies of the financial movement Amanda authorized in the months before her death. I reviewed every form, every date, every signature. And with each page, the plan sharpened. Step 1. Establish coercion. If I could prove Amanda's decisions had been made under psychological duress or manipulation, I could challenge the validity of those financial changes, especially if she had expressed concern or confusion to third parties. Step 2. Challenge the death ruling. Her fall down the stairs had been deemed accidental, but the autopsy had been rushed. No toxicology report, no deeper inquiry, just domestic fall resulting in cranial trauma. I filed a petition through the county medical examiner's office to reopen the case. As Amanda's legal spouse and next of kin, I had that right. I cited inconsistencies in her mental state, sudden legal document shifts, and the now documented involvement of a financially interested ex-husband. Step 4. Surveillance. Mark, my investigator friend, had eyes on Derek's movements. He wasn't hiding. On the contrary, he was living large. Shopping trips, expensive dinners, a weekend in Vail, and all of it funded from the trust Amanda had built off the sale of our joint property. I had him followed for 2 weeks. What I found wasn't shocking, it was confirming. Derek had been in contact with a shady real estate broker and a paralegal with a history of backdating documents. That was the crack I needed. Step 4. Evidence consolidation. I built a file, not a folder, a case file, structured like an intel dossier. I printed timelines, signed affidavits, pulled security footage from a storage unit Amanda had rented near the edge of town. Why a storage unit? I had no idea, until I visited it. Inside were boxes of old journals, legal notes, personal letters, and tucked in the back corner, a voice recorder with Amanda's handwriting on a label, March. I brought it home and listened to it twice before I stopped shaking. Amanda had recorded herself, one entry, a ramble almost, scattered thoughts, but one line chilled me to the bone. I thought Derek had changed, but it's happening again. He watches everything. I don't know how to get out without starting a war. That was it. The missing piece. Amanda hadn't just been manipulated. She'd been scared. Afraid enough to leave herself a breadcrumb trail she hoped someone would find. Well, I found it, and I knew exactly what to do with it. I contacted Paul Mendez, an attorney who specialized in wrongful death and estate fraud. We met at a diner just outside Colorado Springs. I laid everything out: documents, photos, the recorder, even Derek's financial activity. He listened in silence. When he finished, he looked me dead in the eyes. "You don't want revenge. You want justice." "Exactly," I replied. "I want his world to collapse, legally, cleanly, and permanently." Paul nodded. "Then let's start digging the grave with paper."
Paul didn't waste time. Within 72 hours, he filed a petition to the probate court challenging the legitimacy of Amanda's amended estate documents. The foundation of the claim was simple but damning: coercion, conflict of interest, and possible fraud. The voice recording Amanda had made was submitted under seal. Paul included a sworn affidavit from Doug Granger, the financial advisor, who confirmed Derek had attended multiple meetings with Amanda, often answering questions on her behalf. That single statement shifted the narrative from widower to interested manipulator. We followed up by submitting a formal request for a court-ordered toxicology test on Amanda's remains. I knew it would be an uphill battle. The autopsy had been closed, the funeral done, and time was already working against us. But Paul was relentless. "She made a mistake trusting him," he told me. "We won't make that same mistake again." While the legal machinery began grinding forward, Mark kept pressure on the ground. He uncovered text messages between Derek and the paralegal, buried inside a backup on an old iPhone Amanda had stored in her unit. The messages were vague but suggestive. "Make sure the paperwork reflects her intent. Timestamp matters, don't forget." More than enough to flag suspicion. And then, pure luck. Mark discovered that Derek had recently refinanced Amanda's rental condo, listing himself as a co-owner. The problem? He was not. Not legally, not even close. The county clerk's office confirmed that a corrective deed had been filed, but it lacked a notary seal. The signature used for Amanda? It was photocopied. Forgery. We now had document tampering, wire fraud, possibly identity theft. Paul drafted a motion for emergency injunction to freeze all activity related to Amanda's trust, properties, and insurance benefits. The court granted it within hours. Derek's accounts were now locked. The car, the condo, the company, all frozen pending further review. That night, Derek tried calling me. Blocked number. Left a voicemail. "You're dragging Amanda's memory through the mud. She wanted me to have those things. She said it herself. This is sick, man. You're sick." I didn't respond, but I saved the audio. Another brick in the wall. 3 days later, we served Derek with formal notice of legal proceedings, along with a court summons for a hearing on potential fraudulent activity connected to a wrongful death review. He went quiet after that. No more wellness club check-ins, no more Instagram beach selfies. The Lexus disappeared from its usual spot. According to Mark, he'd holed up in a short-term rental under his cousin's name, probably trying to decide whether to fight or flee. But it was too late. The walls were already closing in. The real turning point came from someone unexpected, Amanda's co-worker, Jill, from the vet clinic. She called me privately one afternoon. "Daniel,
I don't want to get involved, but Amanda told me a few things before she passed. She said she was being watched, that she felt cornered. I thought it was distress, but she agreed to sign a sworn statement. Paul added it to the mounting file. We now had testimony, documents, altered signatures, a false deed, and a silenced bank trail. And most importantly, we had momentum. In war, there's a point where you stop planning and start advancing. That moment had arrived. We weren't retaliating. We were reclaiming everything Amanda thought she had lost and exposing the man who tried to rewrite her final chapter with his own greedy hand. And this time, he would be the one with no exit plan.
The courtroom was quiet when we entered. Clean white walls, high windows, the smell of old paper and polished floors. It wasn't dramatic like on TV. No shouting, no surprise witnesses. Just procedure. But underneath that calm, the stakes couldn't have been higher. Derek sat at the defense table, pale and fidgeting. He'd lost weight, wore a borrowed suit that didn't fit. No lawyer this time. Couldn't afford one after the account freeze. He was representing himself, which made Paul grin just a little before composing his face. I sat behind the plaintiff's table, silent, composed, just as I had for every briefing, every deployment. Eyes forward, hands still. The judge began with the injunction request. Paul rose and began laying out the case. The last-minute estate changes, the forged signature on the condo deed, the unauthorized refinancing activity, the questionable LLC, the sealed recording from Amanda, and now sworn testimony from multiple witnesses confirming that she had feared for her safety in the weeks leading up to her death. Then came the final blow. Paul submitted the toxicology results. The judge raised an eyebrow. I thought the death was ruled accidental. It was, Your Honor, but these results show the presence of lorazepam, an anti-anxiety medication Amanda was never prescribed. In large amounts, combined with alcohol, it can impair motor function severely. The judge looked at the paper, then at Derek. Mr. Cole, do you wish to respond? Derek stood, opened his mouth, then sat back down. That silence said everything. The courtroom moved quickly after that. The judge ordered a full criminal investigation to begin, referred the case to the district attorney's office, and extended the asset freeze indefinitely. A second ruling declared the changes to Amanda's estate invalid due to reasonable evidence of coercion and fraud. In plain English, Derek just lost everything. The trust dissolved. The condo reverted to Amanda's estate. The accounts redirected to probate for proper reassignment. Amanda's family, estranged for years, had flown in for the hearing. Her sister cried quietly beside me when the judge's gavel came down. Outside the courthouse, a local news crew waited. Word had spread. Not because I leaked it, but because stories like this always find light. Decorated veteran's wife dies mysteriously. Ex-husband under fire. The next day, it was all over the local headlines. Derek's name, photo, and a summary of the case. He was officially under investigation for involuntary manslaughter and estate fraud. And then the fallout began. His gym dropped him immediately. The real estate broker cut ties and issued a public statement of ignorance. The wellness club revoked his membership, citing public image concerns. He tried to spin his own version of the story online, claims of being framed, a grieving friend, a victim of military paranoia. But the court records didn't lie. The audio didn't lie. The money trail didn't lie.
Amanda's last recorded words didn't lie. A week later, the police executed a search warrant at Derek's rental. They seized electronics, printed financial documents, and even found a pre-signed deed template with Amanda's name half-traced in pencil. He was arrested on the spot, released on bail 48 hours later, but by then, it was over. There was no coming back. His name was stained. His access to Amanda's assets, gone. His fake life, built on charm and fraud, was disassembled piece by piece until there was nothing left but court dates and consequences. And I never raised my voice, never sent a threat, never laid a hand on him. I just kept walking forward, collecting facts, holding receipts, and trusting that if you stand calmly in the truth long enough, lies will collapse under their own weight.
Derek's trial began in late October. The weather had turned colder, the mornings grayer, but I felt clearer than I had in months. Like the storm that had hung over me since Amanda's death was finally beginning to lift. He was charged with estate fraud, forgery, unlawful gain of assets through deception, and negligent homicide, downgraded from murder due to lack of direct evidence of intent. Still, the charges were serious enough to warrant prison time. The courtroom was packed. Local reporters, a few curious law students, and Amanda's family, her sister, her mother, her cousin from Phoenix. People who had once been distant now stood shoulder to shoulder with me, eyes fixed on the man who had manipulated Amanda into the grave. Derek looked like a ghost of himself. Gone was the smug arrogance, the gym-slick charm. He looked tired, unshaven, and unsure, like someone who had just realized the ground was vanishing beneath his feet. Paul delivered his closing argument with the precision of a sniper. Calm, measured. He laid out the financial trail, Amanda's journal entries, the altered estate documents, and the digital timestamps that confirmed Derek's involvement in every step. But it was the audio clip, Amanda's last known recording, that silenced the room. I thought Derek had changed, but it's happening again. He watches everything. I don't know how to get out. Even the jury flinched. Derek's defense attorney tried to argue stress, claimed Amanda had made impulsive financial decisions, and that Derek had merely stepped in to help. But the evidence, the patterns, were too tight. The jury deliberated less than 4 hours. Guilty. On all counts. The judge sentenced him to 7 years for financial fraud and falsifying legal documents. 3 additional years were tacked on for negligent homicide. No parole for the first 5. He was handcuffed in the courtroom. The moment those cuffs clicked shut, I felt something inside me release. Not satisfaction, not revenge, just closure. Outside, a reporter asked me how I felt. I didn't give them much. All I ever wanted, I said, was the truth. That night, Amanda's sister invited me to dinner. It was quiet, just a casserole, a few beers, and old photos spread out on the table. "She really did love you," she said, holding one of the wedding photos. I think she was just ashamed of how far things had gone. She didn't know how to fix it. "I know," I said quietly, "and I don't blame her." Because the truth was, Amanda had been a victim too, of Derek's manipulation, of his coercion, of his greed. Maybe she saw no way out. Maybe that's why she left clues, why she recorded her voice, why she left that envelope that simply read, "If." She knew someone would come looking. And I did. In the weeks that followed, a veterans advocacy group reached out to me. They'd followed the case and were developing resources for service members facing legal fraud and estate manipulation. They asked if they could reference my case anonymously as a precedent. I agreed, because if Amanda's story could help even one other soldier, then her final words wouldn't be in vain. Her name, her memory, deserved to mean something. And now it would. Forever. It's been over a year now. The headlines faded, the court files collected dust. People moved on, as they always do. But for me, something stayed. Not pain, not anymore. Just a kind of clarity I hadn't known I needed. I retired from the military 6 months after the trial. 22 years in uniform, countless deployments, rotations, and more goodbyes than I care to count. I left with honors, recommendations, and a quiet send-off at Fort Carson. No speeches, just handshakes, a final salute, and a heavy box of medals I don't plan to display. I bought a place up in the hills, about an hour outside of Telluride. A small cabin with creaking floorboards, a fireplace that needs constant tending, and a view that makes the silence feel holy. There's a dog now, not Scout, but her twin in spirit. His name's Max. Amanda would have liked him. I think of her sometimes. Not the way she died, but the way she smiled when she gardened, the way she hummed old country songs while folding laundry, the way she tried to make a home, even in chaos. She was flawed. So was I. But she didn't deserve what happened. No one does. Sometimes I read the letter she left in that storage unit, the one labeled "If." If you're reading this, it means something went wrong. I hope I was wrong about him. I hope this message never gets used. She signed it. Love always, Amanda. I don't know if I believe in heaven, but I believe in redemption. I believe people can lose their way and still try to find light at the end. I believe Amanda tried. I believe she wanted out. She just didn't know how. But I found her voice. I made sure it was heard. And in doing that, I think I saved more than just an estate or a name. I saved the truth. I saved a piece of her dignity. There's a bench on the ridge behind my cabin. It overlooks a stretch of valley that turns gold in the fall. I had a small plaque made. Nothing grand, just a simple line. For AM, may your voice echo where silence once ruled. It's where I go when the noise creeps in, the memories, the weight, the rage I never let out. That's the thing about revenge. People think it's an explosion, some cinematic eruption that leaves your enemies in ruins. But it's not. Not when it's real. Real revenge is quiet. It's a courtroom with a cold verdict. It's a lock changed in silence. It's the absence of chaos where someone tried to sow it. It's a man standing alone in the peace he built from ashes. I never raised my voice, never broke anything, never took an ounce of what wasn't mine. And in the end, I walked away with everything they tried to steal. My home, my name, my peace. Amanda is gone. Derek is behind bars. And I am finally free. Free of guilt, free of fear, free of the need to explain myself to anyone who once thought silence meant weakness. Because silence, when used right, is the sharpest blade of all. I sit on that bench some evenings with Max at my feet and coffee cooling in my hand. The sky turns amber, the wind brushes through the trees, and the world feels earned. Not given, not gifted, earned. And for the first time in a long time, I don't feel like I'm surviving. I feel like I'm living.